LaPorta drives it deep left field. Cut this off. It's over. Indians win it 7-6.
Welcome to Fastball and Finance with your host, Matt LaPorta.
What's up, everyone? This is Matt LaPorta with Fastball and Finance, and today we have Mark Guthrie joining us. Mark, thanks for being on the show with us today.
Thanks, Matt. Pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Mark is a former Major League Baseball player, former World Series champion, and former LSU Tiger. Mark played several years in the big leagues, to say the least. How many years was it? 16? Does that sound right?
15. Yep.
15 years. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, I don't know if I could even, I didn't make it that long, but I don't know if I could have made it 8 years.
I was a survivor, man. I fooled him for about the last half of that. So
yeah. Hey, nothing wrong with that. So he played with the Dodgers, a little bit with the Red Sox, the Cubs, the Athletics, the Blue Jays, and the Mets, and of course the Twins. That's who you won the World Series with back in '91.
That's right.
That's awesome, man. And then kind of from the same neck of the woods as me, Venice High School there. I went to Charlotte High School. Were you there coaching at Venice when I was there at Charlotte?
No, I was. I coached at Venice for a few years after you were there. You were already in the big leagues, I think, by the time I started coaching there. But I volunteered right after I retired and had a lot of great times down there and made some lifelong friends on that coaching staff. And Craig Faulkner, the head coach, has been my best friend all my life. So that's kind of how I got involved there.
Gotcha. Now he was there. He probably was coaching then when I was playing.
Sure. Yeah. He's been there. I think this is his 21st year.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I remember we played Venice one. It's kind of a sad story. We went to Venice and played, and my uncle had passed away like the night prior to that game. And so it was kind of a pretty inspirational game. And I happened to hit a home run that game, and our family was there. So it was it was a nice evening kind of for that.
Right.
So one of those
nice memories there.
games.
That's those. And look, anyone who hits a home run at night in Venice, you should remember that. Anyways, to make it extra special for that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So funny enough, we got kind of canceled early on in the show because of some inclement weather there with the power going out. But let's touch back on why you went to college as opposed to professional baseball.
Well, coming out of high school, I went to Venice High School, and coming out of high school, I didn't really have an option to go pro. We didn't get recruited. There wasn't a whole lot of recruiting that even went on back in those days. I graduated in '83. So, unless you were some sort of a freak, which back then was a guy who threw 90. Nowadays, it'd have to be 98. But
yeah,
there just wasn't a lot of recruiting. So Craig Faulkner and I actually both decided where we wanted to go to school, and we said, you know what, we had pretty good senior years, and we said, let's just try to walk on. And we made some phone calls to see if we'd get a chance, and they did give us a chance. It was actually Skip Bertman's first year at LSU, and that was a really blind luck on our part that we happened to go there at that time. And one thing led to another, and we got our chance, and we stuck. And Craig wound up having an 8-year professional career, and kind of it became my life too. So we were very lucky. But pro ball was not an option, that's for sure, at that time.
Yeah. But I mean, I always think going to college is the way to go, in my opinion. I think you can learn so much by getting there, by going there. You're growing yourself, I think, physically and mentally. And so I always think the college route is a great route. And some people may differ from that. Well, what if you got this much money or that much money? But that just kind of is my take on it for the most part. That's a pretty interesting story, that walk-on story. We had a guy at Florida, you might remember him, Darren O'Day. He plays in the big leagues now with the Orioles.
Sure.
The guy got cut as a walk-on his freshman year, tried to make it his next year, and he made it. And here he's been in the big leagues for 7-8 years, nice, healthy contract. And it's just it's one of those things where you just don't give up on your dream, kind of, and you just keep pushing along, right? And whatever door opens, you kind of keep falling through that door.
No doubt, and especially especially in Darren's case, certain types of players, it takes a little bit longer for them to blossom. Being a sidearm pitcher like he was, and I'm assuming he was at Florida too. Although I didn't see him in college, but I know he's a great sidearm pitcher now. Sometimes those guys take a little longer. I wasn't a high velocity guy coming out of high school, and I was left-handed, so it gave me a chance. And Craig was in the same boat. We had good grades. We took care of things we had to take care of, and it allowed us the opportunity. And that's kind of the message we try to preach to the kids we coach now. And it's kind of like, the whole baseball life at one point, when your talent level meets, the rest of everybody else's talent level in that pool. It's just, we always tell them, look, man, you gotta tread water till it's your turn to get in the boat, because you never know when that's coming. But if you give up, and it's easy to do because it's a tough life, sometimes you'll never know. And there's a lot of guys that have persevered and really had, really great experiences with it. But it isn't easy, as you know.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. And so what year did you make your major league debut?
I went to LSU for 4 years. It's funny when you talk about, taking the college route. I remember my junior year, and I don't mean to get off track, but my junior year, we were at the College World Series. It was the first year LSU ever went. And I remember going with a couple buddies over to a Denny's to get something to eat after the game. And the Louisville AAA team was there. It was the Cardinals affiliate at the time. And 4 of these huge guys came walking in the room, and they had shower shoes on and these shorts, and they kind of looked rough, with beards. They looked definitely older than me. And I had just been drafted by the Cardinals at the time. And I looked and I said, man, I don't know if I'm ready for those guys to be my teammate right now as a 20-year-old, and that really left a huge impression on me. And I went back and had a phone call or two with a scout. Just felt like, man, I'd rather go where I know I'm wanted right now. And fortunately, it worked out. But the college route, the obvious reasons of getting your education behind you are important, but especially nowadays, man. I mean, the level of life in especially in the SEC or any of these big schools now, the way you're treated, it's completely different. So, it's a great life, and it's a great experience, and it's tough to top.
Yeah, I mean, it's a downgrade to go to after you come out of a big school. It's a downgrade to go play in the minors almost. I mean, the stadiums have gotten better now over the last 10 years, but still you have the bus travel that's a little more difficult, and you're eating peanut butter and jelly instead of a nice meal after
right.
game. So there's definitely some getting used to that. So that
everyday pressure is tough on an 18-year-old kid. I'll tell you that. If you're going to go to pro ball at 18, it is your streaks in high school or college, you get in a bad rut for 3 weeks and it may cost you 20 at bats, right? You do that in pro ball and it might cost you, 60 points on your, it's brutal. It's tough.
Oh yeah. Yep.
You mentally have to be ready to be able to handle that.
You've got to be extremely mentally tough. I mean, I think that's one part, kind of talking about the game of baseball. I think that's one part that people don't value as much, especially younger players. They don't value the mental side of the game. And to me, that's one of the biggest parts of the game, especially getting to that next level professionally and into the big leagues. I mean, wouldn't you agree with that?
No doubt about it. And one thing we always tell the kids that are asking the question of is it for me? Should I be doing this now? And is this really how I want to make do I want to make a career out of this? It's what I tell them is whatever you're doing, if you're going to JUCO, if you're going to a 4-year school, if you're going to, especially if you're going to pro ball, is you think you love the game right now. And I know in my heart, no one loved the game more than I did at that age. But there are times in pro ball, I remember there were times in the minor league where I didn't love it so much. And if you don't have that desire and you don't have that passion for the game, you're not going to survive. And it's just, it has to be almost overwhelming, to be able to get you through it, just because the mental side of it just beats you down. And I respect anybody that played professionally, guys that play high level college, junior, whatever. If you have some sort of success with it, you've got something mentally that a lot of people don't possess.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta grit, you gotta grind, because it is, the thing about baseball, it's so much like life. Like I tell people, baseball does not care if you're sick, you're tired, you're hurt, family is
no doubt.
ill, dog died. Baseball doesn't care. It's coming
No
at
doubt.
you day in and day out. And so you've got to prepare mentally for it. So you got to play with Skip Bertman. What a great experience that might have been, must have been, playing with him. Now, how many College World Series did you guys go to while you were there?
We went, Skip's first season was our freshman year. And then we wound up going to a regional for the first time our sophomore year and didn't win. And then my junior and senior year, we went to the World Series. And my senior year, we were knocked out. There's a famous home run that Ed Sprague hit off Ben McDonald when he was a freshman. And we were winning that game in the 10th inning by 3 runs, and he hit a walk-off grand slam. And so that was my last college game. But the whole experience at LSU and the way that Skip built that program, it's just, I learned so much more than just, book work and things like that. I mean, just learned how to run businesses. I learned how to, how to work, and he's a pretty amazing coach. Probably, in my opinion, the best that's ever done it.
Yeah. I mean, he's a legend. I think a couple of years ago, I went up there, for an event, and I got to meet him. Now he's got to be late 80s, somewhere in that. Early 80s? I
think late 70s, maybe early 80s. But yeah, he's slowing down a little. But when you sit down and talk to him, he's still got it. A big thrill for me was 2 years ago. My son was playing for the Gators, and we went to LSU for the first time. And actually, it was my second son that had played at LSU. My older son played at Brown, and his very first collegiate game was at Alex Box, and that was kind of a big deal for me too. And it was something, but. Skip was there for the Gator game, and I remember he grabbed my wife and I, and he took us right behind the plate and sat there for 6 innings with him, and he still predicted every single thing that was going to happen in that game. And he hadn't seen Florida play all that much, and he had every player figured out, and talked about what this pitcher was going to do. He had an uncanny ability, to be able to, obviously because he was that successful, to be able to predict what was coming. His knowledge of the game was really incredible, but he's still pretty sharp in that respect. He's had some health issues now, but it's always a treat, when we go back for events and get to, they call it the piano time, sit around the piano and tell stories.
So I've heard guys talk about Skip, and they always say, they always talk about a funny story. What's one funny story that, reminds you of Skip, or that Skip did or said?
There's a million of them, but it's funny when we tell these stories, he just sits there and laughs, and then he denies that they ever happened.
That's what I've heard.
Something where he was tough on us one day or something. And I remember one day we were playing at Mississippi State. This is when they had Will Clark and Palmero and Bobby Thigpen and those guys. And I was pitching, and Jeff Rebele was our shortstop, and he was a 12-year big leaguer too. And I was always notoriously terrible at covering first base for one reason or another. And so somebody hit a ground ball to the right side of the infield, and I was pitching, and the first baseman threw it to Reb, who was playing short, and he flipped it back over to first and probably made a pretty good throw, and I didn't get it, and the ball went into the dugout, a run scored, and he came out, and he comes out, and I go, oh, no, here we go. And he came, and believe me, we all got it at one point or another, and he came out, and I was just like staring at the ground. He came out. He was coming to take me out of the game, and he looks, and he goes, geez, he goes, what a shame. And he looks at Reb, and he goes, Rebele, he goes, with a few expletives thrown in. He says, Rebele, he goes, what a shame. He goes, that's your fault. And I'm going, and I'm starting to feel bad. I'm like, what? And he goes, that's your fault because that's not in his repertoire. So whenever Rev and I, we always kid about things in our repertoire. We're actually friends to this day. We talk all the time. He goes, that's not in his repertoire. You blew it. So, but anyway, there's so many some of that isn't even. I mean, he has some very harsh ones too that are really. Sure. I could go on all night, but you know what's fun about it is when you meet guys, you know, like yourself, or guys that may have come across him or had a night with him somewhere, and they do the imitation of him, and they do it just like him, and it's really neat. You know, guys that I didn't even know that may have played at LSU at 6 years later than I did, and I meet him in pro ball, and you go out and have dinner with him or something one night, and the guy will talk in that voice all night long. But it's
that's funny.
He was tough. Believe me, there were times where, and we tell him this to this day, there were times, and I'm sure he knew, where we wanted to strangle him, but he was tough, but he was fair, and just a really incredible experience.
That's awesome. So you mentioned you had. I know Dalton. He went to University of Florida. I don't think I know your other son that went to Brown.
Right. Kevin, my older son, is 2 years older than Dalton. He went to Brown and graduated from there, and he's now interning in the Pirates player development system. So he's learning the ropes and trying to make a career out of the other side of the game right now. And he has a good mind for it. And hopefully he again, it's what I've learned. It's as tough on that end for those guys as it is for players in the minor leagues. There's not a lot of job opportunity, and you gotta work like you talk about emergency room physicians working 20 hours a day. These guys are obviously not as important as emergency room physicians, but they're he's been going for 2 years now and just really grinding it out in the front office with them.
Yeah, that's tough. That's a tough. But you get to that mountaintop, it's nice. Get on a team,
no doubt,
a GM or a president. So kind of with Dalton, did you always want him to go to Florida? Did you care where he went, or did you push him to try to go to LSU? I bring him up only because he went to University of Florida where I went. So.
No, there was no pushing. Dalton committed fairly early, and it was actually a surprise when he did it. We went up one night during the fall of his sophomore year, and we went up to see one of his high school teammates, Aaron Rhodes, pitch in a scrimmage. And we had, I believe Aaron was a freshman at the time, and it was his first fall. So we're like, hey, let's go, we'll go up and watch Aaron pitch. And at the time, and then Craig Bell, the Florida's recruiter, came, and he had known Dalton from the summer ball circuit and stuff. And it was all kind of new to me at the time. And I was like, man, he's not ready to do this yet. He doesn't know where he wants to go. He doesn't, and Dalton knew that as well. And we were just going to watch Aaron, and they said, well, let us show you around. And they went and showed him around, and I stayed in the seats and watched the game. And actually Dalton and Kevin walked around with Craig, and they got done, and he sat down next to me. We were watching the scrimmage, and he said, Dad, I want to go to school here. I'm like, what? and he said, he goes, his thing was he wanted to play in the SEC. He was a really good student. And he said, if I don't go to, he goes, it's close to home. He goes, why wouldn't I go here? And in my mind, I thought, well, the academics are great. He's right, and I said, and so he actually did it that night, and it was totally out of the blue. So we didn't have any inkling. And he was the kid I didn't think would want to stay close to home. And my older boy Kevin was the one I thought would stay close to home, and it wound up totally opposite. So you never know.
Yeah. How about that? Now you just had the two sons, two boys?
No, I got a third one. I got a 12-year-old still, retirement baby that keeps my wife and I young. So we're
how about that?
We're still grinding.
Yeah, buddy. All right. Well, I mean, I've got 4 kids. I've got a 6-year-old, twins that are about 4 years old now, and a 1-year-old. So.
Wow. All boys?
No, I got a daughter who's the 6-year-old, the twin sons, and then a 1-year-old daughter.
Awesome. Congrats on that.
Thank you. Yeah. So they keep us busy. So I
want to you're just starting out, buddy. You got a lot of great things in front of you. That's great.
Oh yeah. We got a lot of.
It goes quick, though. Believe me, as I'm sure you've heard.
Oh, I know.
It goes so quick.
It's amazing how fast my daughter. She's 6 years old. I can't even believe it. Like it was yesterday. We just had her, but yeah, it goes by fast. So
no doubt.
I wanted to go back to your professional playing days and talk a little bit about. What was the World Series like playing with the Twins and then, tell us a little bit about what that was like and some of the big players that you guys had on that team, and just, again, that experience.
Well, I was very fortunate in getting drafted by the Twins and being in that organization and being able to come up with the group of guys that they had there at the time. And what I learned, unfortunately, 12 years later, this is my third year in the league when we won it. And 12 years later, I learned that all teams really aren't like that. And there were a few, but the camaraderie that was on that team, and you always hear about this in champagne celebrations and how this group was different. And there's really something to that. And that team was a very tight team. It's funny, when I watch Red Sox games now, and I wind up cheering for the Red Sox now because their pitching coach, Carl Willis, was a bullpen mate of mine there. Chili Davis, their hitting coach, was our designated hitter that year. They're successful coaches because they can communicate with guys. They're likable. People respect them. They listen to them. And there's a lot more to it than, in my opinion, there's a lot more to it than just pure, as a coach, than just pure mechanics of hitting or mechanics of pitching. And I think they're able to get a lot out of their players because of that. But the whole team revolved around Kirby Puckett. We had other great. Kent Herbeck was a great player. Jack Morris was there. It was unbelievable that year. Scotty Erickson won 20 games that year. But Kirby was the leader. And when you get a guy like that played the game like he played it, it makes it very difficult for anybody to go off that path and be kind of a turd, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
It just wasn't accepted. And man, it made Tom Kelly's job easier, and he was tough. Tom Kelly was a tough manager but a very good manager. But the whole dynamic with Kirby was something that I'll cherish forever. And when people talk about Hall of Fame and numbers and this and that, and, he may not have had, numbers that other guys have, but there's no doubt those 2 world championships that they won were a result of him and the type of person, and as well as obviously the talented player that he was. He was something special.
Wow. Yeah, he was fun to watch when I was younger. It's awesome when you get to play with, a guy like that, and just kind of one of those, quote, we'll call it legend type players, He
was so, Matt, he was so, the game meant so much to him, and his teammates meant so much to him. There were times on that team where I would be the 24th or 25th guy. No doubt I'd be struggling, getting shelled out of the bullpen or whatever at times. And he was always the first guy there, and he could pull you out of it, and he genuinely cared. It's not, I've played with a lot of other stars who really, and I'm sure you have too, who, that's not their thing, and it doesn't have to be everybody's thing, but he was the guy who could do that. And the game meant so much to him that I think, after he retired, he had some kind of odd things that happened. He was a guy that couldn't handle not being in the game because he loved it so much. He loved his teammates so much. He just had a hard time with it after he retired. And unfortunately, then he wound up, getting sick and having a stroke. I really believe that the inability to play the game anymore has led to his, it killed him.
Yeah, that's sad. That's, that's just something you see a lot, not necessarily with guys, quote, dying after the game, shortly after, but just that transition. And I'm glad that's a great segue into kind of the next part of what I really wanted to talk about is that segue, that transition out of the game of baseball. It's a difficult thing to do, whether you're coming out of college, whether you played several years of pro ball, whether you had a 10-year big league career. It ends for everybody. And do I think it's a little more difficult for guys that have played 7, 8, 9, 10, 20 years in professional baseball? Yeah. I mean, that's all I've known for your entire life. And it's just it's a difficult transition. So what are some of the things, how was your transition out? And then what were some of the things you did to maybe make the transition easier, or something you would share with other people as they're transitioning out of the game?
Well, I think everybody's situation is different. I think it's a little more difficult if you're a superstar kind of guy, like Kirby was. I think, if unfortunately the game defines some people, and I never felt that way because I always felt, like I said, I kind of survived my career. I survived. I could never get cocky. I was never comfortable. everybody always asks that question too. Like, when did you know like you had it made? I'm like, never. I never felt like I had it made. In my 14th year, I always felt like I was getting released. You know, it was, it just is, you know, so I think that kept me humble and made the transition easier, because it became, you know, after a while, I love the games, and then, you know, your kids get older, and, you know, you're playing and you're away from them, and it's tough. And I knew, you know, my kids they would come up and spend the summers with me, so they weren't, you know, playing Little League and things like that back then. And I thought, man, you know, I want to watch them play. I want to, you know, I want to be there. And you know, a turning point for me came one day, and we were in St. Louis, and Rick Honeycutt was towards the end of his career. And I remember getting dressed and listening to a pregame show. And as a relief pitcher, you know, you usually don't head down till, you know, the bottom of the first or something.
Yep.
And so I was hearing the whole pregame show, and they had a long interview with Rick Honeycutt, who was in his 18th or 20th year or something like that. A great player. And he's still the pitching coach with the Dodgers. He's obviously a baseball lifer. And he was talking about his impending retirement that was coming at the end of the year. And he had a daughter that was 18, and she was graduating from high school. And he said, man, he said, I don't want to miss that. I want to be there for that. And there's things I need to do now. And I started thinking, man, you know, my kids were, they were, I think 7 and 5 at the time. And I was like, man, I don't want my kids to be 18 and then, you know, it's over, you know, and they're gone. And and that really stuck with me. And it just kind of was like, you know what, when the game isn't going to, you know, satisfy things that, you know, more than your family does, and not that they ever do. Don't get mad. It's a stupid thing to say, but it just becomes to the point where it's like, you know, you weigh the options, and it's like, I can't miss this anymore. And the game isn't. I don't need to play the game anymore, fortunately. So that it was time to quit, and I never had any regrets that way. And I think that so the way it all happened kind of helped me, and you know. But I will say this, I was fortunate enough to have some good people around me, you know, in the financial area, in the you know, my agents. I had, they were two separate groups there, but, you know, they got me through some times after I retired that I certainly, you know, I'm a conservative guy. I'm not flashy, and, you know, didn't have a lot of crazy investments or anything like that, but it's hard, man. I mean, and when I went into the league, I was thought, if I could play for 5 years, I'll be all right. You know, I could make enough money to be financially secure, and I'd be all right. But that never really happens, because it happens for the guys who make $100 million, hopefully. But I played with guys who have made $50-60 million, who, you know, went through the recession of, you know, 08, 09, and you know, lost it. And so you have to surround yourself with the right people that you trust and can get you through a lot of those early retirement things, and get you on the right track to you know, for the rest of your life. And I know I got a little bit jumbled right there with that answer, but it's you know, my mind's flashing around on all these different things that happened to me that, you know, made a few mistakes with that didn't hurt me too bad, and then luckily listened to this guy at that time or that guy at another time, and was able to get through some you know, tough economic times in the country's, you know, history, and you know, I know a lot of guys that played that just retired around that time, and it was rough.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, because, you know, especially at that time, you got guys that are retiring, and they're used to having millions of dollars come in, and now they're having hundreds of thousands of dollars going out with no money coming in. And that could be a scary time for people. And then if you're leveraged in certain ways, I mean, I see it all the time with clients, you know, they're leveraged in certain ways. And when that money stops, well, that leverage is still there. That debt's still there. Somebody's got to service that, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
And, you know, that I think that's one of the things that you see with guys that transition kind of from a financial perspective, is that, you know, while it's great to have that $4 or $5 million house, you know, and while you're playing and it's 20,000 square feet, well, what happens when you're done playing and that house costs you $200,000 a year just to maintain? You know, I see guys with that all the time, and the burden and the stress that's got to create on guys. It's just, it's not, I don't think it can be healthy. And so being conservative, you know, is the way to go. And, you know, and everybody says that, but it's like, well, what does conservative really mean? You know? And so everybody has different answers for that, but yeah, it's
living within your means, right? So it's a lot tougher once you retire. Okay, so I retired in 05 was my last spring training. And so I was good, and financially I felt like I could make it. And then all of a sudden the recession came in 2008, and the stock market goes down 50-60% or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot tougher when you're not working, and you're sitting there and your mind is just watching your money go away, right? And instead of, even if you get a job that isn't going to even make that up, at least you get physical, you get active, you mentally can handle it. When you're not working and you watch it go away, that's one of the toughest things that I went through. It was like, geez, what's going on? What did I just play 3 years for nothing?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean,
so I don't know. It's again, I was very lucky to have a guy that I got involved with and talked me off the ledge a few times during, believe me, when you watch all, your portfolio go down and you're living, it's different when you're living off your portfolio like I was.
Yep.
And, you watch that portfolio go down and I'm like, look, that's it, get out. I can live and I can live and I can do this that way. And he's like, no, you can't do it now. You can't do it now. And I'm like, no, you're crazy. I got to get out. And, fortunately I didn't do it and things turned around and I guess experience going through something like that is the only thing that can really, cement your mind into what's doing the right thing. But it's harrowing.
Oh yeah. It's I'm sure that was super stressful for a lot of people. So when you retired in 05, how many years was it prior to you? I'm assuming you didn't work. You just you started your baseball club basically at some point, right?
Well, I retired in 05 and we started a 9-year-old travel team in 04. Actually, I had surgery in 04. I was in camp with the Pirates and my shoulder blew out. Had surgery and I stayed home the entire 2004 season, and I started a travel organization for my middle son's team, and then actually for both sons. I started 2 different organizations. So I really spent all my time coaching, and I loved being around the kids. We made, again, lifelong friends with the parents, that we coached. We had groups together for 7 or 8 years until they went into their high school ages and in high school divisions, and really just kind of got involved that way and spent my time doing that. And we spent a lot of time doing it. It was a blast. Did it with some great people and again, lifelong friends because of it. And so that's what it started. And then we wound up, when my kids got into high school, Craig and I started volunteering at Venice High School with Craig, and you grew up in this area, and unless you went away to play for a travel team in some other area, there just wasn't a lot of recruiting going on. And we had a slew of really good players at Venice High School at the time, and they fell into an age group where the kids that were in 11th grade were very young, and the players that were incoming freshmen were good enough to play up in a division. So we were able to put everybody together in a group. And we said, let's go out and we formed like a lot of teams still do, we formed a group that would play in the summer and fall. And it was all of our high school kids. So we were able to do it. It was great. And we're like, man, I said, Craig, there's some really good players out here and we can't get a recruiter to come watch them. Because you would go to the tournaments and they would all go watch the big travel teams, the ones that had, the number 1 ranked players or whatever. And I remember going out of the dugout, Craig and I would do it. And one of us would leave the dugout. And for instance, he would go shake hands with a recruiter from some school and come back. And I would look at him and go, what do you say? And he'd be telling the guy, look, we got a team over here. And there's a lot of good players, coach, that I think would be, worthwhile for you to see. And the guy would say, what's the name of your team? And he would say, well, we're called Indians baseball. It's a high school team. And the guy would say, yeah, okay. And so we'd laugh because I'd say, he'd come back to the dugout and I go, did he look at you cross-eyed? And he said, yeah, he did. So they just wouldn't come over and watch a high school team because they're trying to, create the best focus they can and see the most amount of good players that they could. So, well, one thing led to another. And for a year and a half, we did that. And I said, we got to, we got a call from a guy on the other side of the state. He asked us to come join this group. So we did that. And for one season, and it didn't work out. It wasn't what we were looking for. And we brought a bunch of players over there. So we finished the summer. But in the meantime, it was great because our players got to play in all these big events. They were on a big name team and they got recruited. So the problem was the area, we just felt like there wasn't the proper amount of recruiting for the talent that we had. And so we said, you know what, let's just draw it up and do it our own way. So we formed our own organization, and we've been doing that for 7 years now. And it started out as kind of an outlet to get that group of kids recruited because we felt like they deserved it. And then what happened was they started winning everything when a few other kids joined. They started winning all these tournaments. They started getting all this national recognition. And then everybody wanted to come play. You know, not everybody, but a lot of people wanted to come play. And it's funny because that one high school team that we had 14 Division I players on it, and we couldn't get anybody to come watch them play. You know, there were 18 kids on the team. 14 of them wound up playing Division I baseball. We're like, we knew we weren't crazy. You know, let's just, you know, please just come over and watch them. And we said, man, there's got to be a better way. So we kind of lucked into joining another group from over in Spruce Creek. Johnny Goodrich, who coaches at Spruce Creek High School, brought his kids over, and that group kind of formed our initial teams for our travel organization, the Florida Burn. So what started out as kind of a hobby kind of turned into a full-time gig again, and it's cool because it's what we enjoy doing. It's what we feel like we're supposed to do, and there's a little bit of frustration that goes with dealing with expectations and parents assessing their kids' talents. And but for the most part, we've had a lot of really good people, and you know, our coaches do a terrific job, and we try to stay organized with it. And so that's where we're at now. So not that one question led to a long drawn out story that probably took about 4 more questions away from you, but
no,
but that's what we're doing now. So we're getting ready to go to Jupiter this weekend for our big end of the fall big amateur event over there. And so
who puts
it's
that
been
one
pretty
on?
Cool. That's Perfect Games, big
Perfect game.
WWBA World. Yeah,
Okay.
That's their big one. So it's pretty cool. They you know, the major league teams now, they're all sending 10 scouts to the event, and every college is there. And it's, you know, like with everything, it becomes a little bit, you know, there are some frustrations that come with it. And, you know, being a baseball purist guy like yourself, some of the things would drive you crazy, but we've learned to deal with it, and we've learned to kind of channel the way we want to do it into our organization. And I think, you know, the reputation that our organization has kind of shows that. So that's pretty satisfying for us.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, it does. I mean, you know, I couldn't imagine, you know, you guys, how many teams do you guys have again?
We had 13 this summer in the high school groups.
13 high school groups?
We have 13 in the high school groups, and we have you know, we have Roy Halladay coaches one of our teams in the 13, 14-year-old group up in Clearwater.
Okay.
Toby Hall, the former Rays catcher, coaches our 2021 team.
Oh, wow.
So we've had you know, it's guys that are kind of along the same page. You know, they're like,
yeah,
they get rubbed the wrong way by a lot of the stuff that goes on, and we're like, look, what, you know, we want you to be with us. You do your thing, and we'll take care of the rest of it for you. You know, the communication, the making sure everybody knows where they're at, and as long as you communicate, for the most part, people are pretty happy. I mean, that's you know, the rest of it the player has to take care of. And so when I mean communicate, you know, communicate on where they should be. We need to communicate with recruiters and scouts for them, and you know, like we tell them, it's important that you understand the communication is top notch, because if it's not, trust me, that recruiter isn't getting called back by somebody in another organization. And believe me, you know, we're not going to create miracles for the player, but we are going to make sure that he gets the message, and you know, that coach knows exactly what that player's all about. So if there is an opportunity for him or the guy further on down the line, it gets handled.
Definitely. So let me, you know, and hopefully I don't step on anybody's toes here, but this is kind of, do you think kids are playing too much baseball, or is there such a thing as too much baseball?
I think there is. I think so. It's a very important deal. Like when we started this out, just last year they started implementing the pitch smart system in all the perfect game events and in most of the other events now, which is definitely needed. You know, but we were always, you know, Craig and I, when we started this, we said the very worst thing we can do in dealing with high school coaches, and we're taking their players, is to, you know, you don't take a guy out into summer ball into a recruiting event and ride him like a mule. You know, our guys throw, you know, we have 7-inning games. We have a guy throw 4, a guy throw 3 most of the time. If a guy keeps his pitch count down, well, now there are rules, thank God, that you know, you can't go over it anyway. But people still do abuse it. And I don't think summer ball is the time to be throwing 105 pitches. That being said, if you play for the wrong guy and just 3 or 4 years ago, there were guys who threw 10 innings every weekend. If you play for that guy, yeah, it becomes too much baseball. If you are playing, all year round without a break, there's too much baseball. I'm a firm believer of rest. We try to end our seasons on certain dates and have our tryouts on dates where the kids are resting for 2.5, 3 months at a time before they come back. So with our kids, we have, for a 12-month season, we have 5 months off. And then they have, and that includes their high school, summer, and fall ball takes the other 7 months up. Now, and they're not playing every weekend either. They're playing, 6 events in the summer and they're playing 4 events in the fall. So, and then their high school season, which down here, it's a long year. So, for the pitchers, especially, we try to take care of our pitchers no matter what. The worst thing that can happen is if a guy gets injured under your watch, and sure, there's some things you can't control,
of course,
but overuse injuries are criminal, and that can't happen. So we'd rather lose games than be known for losing games than have guys go out and throw 10 innings a weekend. And then you do run into the parent who says, all the time you get, my son's different, and you gotta, well, no, he's not.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
he's not.
Once your arm blows, you're never the same.
Yep. I mean, this is something that, this drives me up the wall, only because, it probably wouldn't bother me as much if I didn't have as many injuries as I've had. I mean, I'm 32 years old and I've had 3 hip surgeries with a full hip replacement, right? Like,
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm in rehabbing twice a week. I just had the hip replacement end of June, and I'm in there rehabbing twice a week. And it's amazing, the 10-year-olds, the 11-year-olds, the 9-year-olds, the kids that I see in here. Oh, my elbow, I got an elbow injury, or I have a knee injury, or I have a back injury. And I'm like, I didn't know what a training room was until I was a sophomore in high school. And
right.
Or maybe even a junior, and it's like, and that's where I get frustrated. Like, parents, for me, I'm like, parents, give your kid a breather. I remember there was a kid in there, he had a messed up foot, and he'd come in there, rehab for an hour, and he couldn't have been more than 11 years old. Come rehab for an hour, and then they'd go right to, he actually was a hockey player, but I think it's across the board in all sports now. But they'd go right to hockey practice, and then they'd wonder why his foot wasn't getting better. It's like, you got to give it a break. You've got to rest, and
right.
And, I just hate to see it. And I hate, like you said, it is criminal to see these kids get hurt. And you know what? The sad thing is, when you've got some joker coach who doesn't really know what's going on, or maybe he's more focused on winning as opposed to growing the player. Parents, yeah, sure. Coach knows best. Let him keep playing. Let him keep pitching. And lo and behold, the kid's blown out his Tommy John or a shoulder or a knee. And it's so sad to see that happen. I think,
it is. And there's a lot that goes into it too. And one of my biggest pet peeves is when you get in these events and you're playing 3 or 4 games in a day. And I mean 3 or 4 7-inning games, and sometimes they narrow them down to 5 if they're short on time and they're not going to get them in. But sometimes you're playing 3 games on the second to last day, and then you're going out and playing 2 more. To me, that's the most dangerous thing, because you're getting fatigued pitchers, whether they're playing left field in the game, the day before, and he's all fresh, he hasn't pitched. But I know, standing there as a coach, that I get home and my back, and I know I'm old, but I mean, my back and knees are killing me from standing there all day. I'm thinking, these poor kids, man, and it's just rough. And then you run into the other aspect of, now there's new data out talking about how, what is really causing the arm damage. Now they're saying that it's more about fastballs than it is about curveballs. And to me, it's all about throwing improperly is what it's about. And it's just, there aren't enough guys out there that know when a kid's throwing improperly. There really aren't. And so you're going in blind. So all you can do is go by these pitch counts and really try to cut them even back more if you can. And because there's not a lot of trained guys that know when a kid's mechanics are breaking down, and that's when they all get hurt.
Yep. No, that's it. Do you think travel baseball is going to overtake high school baseball?
Do you think in the future there won't be any high school baseball?
I hope not. You know what? That's a tricky question, and the reason that I think a lot of the reason that people say that is because of there's so many. I think that the high school athletic associations over police a little bit. They are starting to loosen some of their deals up a little bit on that, and I think they're going to have to. But the hard part about players need high school baseball. Players need to be in an environment that isn't so determined by how much money you've paid to join a team. It isn't determined by anything except your ability. And if you never play in that environment and then you're walking onto a college campus, I mean, holy smokes, where are you? How are you going to deal with that then? And it's an important education to play high school baseball. I love high school baseball, and my partner's been a 21-year high school baseball coach. So, I sure hope it doesn't turn to that. I think it would be criminal if it did, but the people, are districted to play at schools, and then all of a sudden they're saying, well, geez, I don't really like this coach, and I don't like the way he treats my kid. Maybe we'll just play travel ball. And you know what? I think sometimes you need to be thrown into those situations, and the kids need to be thrown into those situations and learn how to handle them a little bit. It may not be optimal situations. You can still go play travel baseball after and get recruited, but it turns into a little bit more like AAU basketball did too. Now you have, if you're a college baseball coach, you're playing on Tuesday nights, Wednesday nights, and you're getting ready for your weekends starting on Thursday now. When do you really have time to go see a kid play a high school baseball game? It's very difficult economically, for them to get around. Your big schools, your Florida and Florida States can do it, but once you get into the lower D1s and the D2s and the mid majors, your budgets for recruiting just aren't there. So you got to rely on these events where you can, sit in the middle of a quadplex and watch 8 teams play at once and hope someone catches your eye that way.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. It's just one of the things that I've thought about. Is baseball in high school going to be done? And like you said, hopefully it's not. But I guess the time will tell with that.
Right.
As we kind of wrap up here, I really, one of the last questions I'd really like to ask is, what is, so one of two is, if you could do anything differently from a baseball perspective, professionally, would you? So that's the first question.
Well, I guess, boy, that's tough. That's really tough. There's probably a million things. And then there's probably another part of me that says, no, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I guess knowing what I know now, did I know a lot more when I was 35 than I did when I was 25. And I kept learning every day, and I kept, I tried to make adjustments to stay alive. If I could train differently, I would, but everybody trained the same way when I broke in. It was just how much did you run and how far did you run, and you did your Job cuff weights, and that was it. And there wasn't a lot of weight training. And boy, I wish I could have, formed my body differently as a young player, but no one did really back then. So I guess no. I mean, players today are wound so much tighter. They throw a lot harder. They're geared to go. The pitchers are geared to go 6 innings and blow it out. And every reliever who comes into the game is 96 to 103 now.
Gosh, it's crazy.
It is unbelievable. Man, I'm glad I played when I did. I don't know if my body would have been able to train that way and to stay healthy. There's a lot more injuries, in my opinion, because.
Oh yeah.
I don't think it's because they threw such and such when they were younger. I really don't. I think, look, when we were kids, we were throwing. We may not have had fall programs, but we were throwing until we couldn't throw anymore, and then we'd play, and then we'd go play somewhere else, and in a backyard somewhere, and then we go to our game and throw 7 or 8 innings. Everybody threw complete games, and that's just the way it was. And you throw 160 pitches, and there's always been a lot of throwing, but it's just it's a different animal now that has to train and do this, and their bodies are so they're not built to throw 100 miles an hour. So I don't know if I ever could have done that. Maybe the best I ever could have done was 94, if I trained that way, and who knows, I might've gotten killed. So I'm glad I played when I did. I have a lot of respect for these guys though. And I really appreciate what they do to get themselves ready to play. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, definitely. I know for me, when people ask me that question, I always say, kind of the one thing I would have done differently, or we'll call it regret, is I wish I enjoyed the game more. I put so much pressure on myself to be successful. I really just wish I enjoyed the game more, and just, really really embraced the suck, right? Embraced how bad I was, or how bad I thought I was, or the injuries I was dealing with. But, because before I knew it, my career was over. I mean,
right.
It was unbelievable. And so I always ask that question, what guys would do differently or think differently when they're playing.
Yeah, but then the flip side of that, Matt, those two, I mean, that's kind of back referring to what I said when we first started talking is, when I always say I never felt comfortable. And I always wonder, had I felt comfortable, would my performance have been better, or would I not had that edge? I don't know.
That's true. Yeah.
So it's a difficult thing to say. I saw a lot of guys who acted comfortable that weren't around very long too.
Yeah.
They had a lot more talent than I did. I'll tell you that. There was a lot of guys. I tell my kids all the time, look, I played with so many guys in the minor leagues that were so much better than me. And I don't know why it happened. I really don't. And you just got to take care of the things you can take care of. And I always thought, my thing was, I'm always going to work and do it. Like back then it was running. I'm going to run. If I have a bad outing, I'm just going to go run until I can't run anymore the next day. And so I don't look back and go, why didn't I do that? I can honestly say, that I did do that. But I don't know. Maybe the comfortable Mark Guthrie might have been better. I don't know, but we're never going to know the answer to that one.
No, we're not going to go back in time, I don't think. So what last question here for you. What's one thing that you would say to parents who want to see their kids succeed in baseball? And then what's one thing you would say to the kids that, want to further their career, be it, I'm assuming a lot of them want to go play in the big leagues. That's, maybe they don't, but, let's assume that they want to go play in the big leagues. What's one piece of advice you would give to each parent and kid?
Well, we deal with this a lot in what we do, and in trying to get kids, in connection with recruiters and scouts and things like that. And I always tell sometimes you get kids that are overly paranoid about it, and it becomes their total obsession. And the bottom line is you're never going to fool the game. And if I'm, as a parent, my main goal is to make sure that my kids appreciate and understand the game. And in my opinion, that is what, the higher level of appreciation will make them better. It'll make them, teach them the little things about the game, teach them, and then teach them to go play the game wherever they are to win the game. I don't care if there's, in these high school events, I always tell a kid, I don't care if there's a recruiter in the stands. I don't care. You got to, if you're playing in your backyard, I don't care. You got to play. If you don't have that desire to go play and to win every game, it matters, like it is the seventh game of the World Series, then something's missing. And to become overly paranoid with all the peripheral things around the rankings and this kid's getting committed over here, and why isn't he looking at my son? And it's just, you gotta engulf yourself in the game, else you're never going to reach your ceiling, in my opinion. And you see this all the time with professionals in their contract years, and they start thinking about, I got to do this, I got to get to this level, or else, I'm not going to make this amount of money, or they're going to cut me, or whatever. Some guys actually play better that way because it zones them in, but not many, and the worrying about it just becomes, it just takes away from the in my, what I've learned is the true appreciation of the game is what matters more than anything. It's any scholarship or any, contract or anything like that. And look, that's probably something I learned after I retired, unfortunately. But baseball is an amazing game. And my greatest, I have 3 kids that play on 3 different levels. And my youngest son will probably, may not ever play high school baseball, but his love for the game is exactly like his brother's. And to be able to sit down and watch a game with him or watch a game with my other two boys, it's you can get so much out of it. And if you don't focus on that, in my opinion, you're missing a lot, and you're not doing justice for the game. And if you do the game justice, it'll take care of you.
Yep. No, I love it. That's awesome. I think that's a great piece of advice for parents and coaches to listen to and kind of put into practice. Man, Mark, this was awesome. It really, I really had a great time chatting with you today.
Me too. It was great. I thought, man, we could go a lot longer than 45 minutes. We probably did, didn't we?
I know. Yeah. I think we might have went closer to an hour, but yeah, I told you it goes by fast, and it goes by fast, but there's so much great knowledge there, I think, for kids and parents to listen to, and hopefully they can get something out of it. Again, talking with a former SEC player, former big leaguer, World Series champ. I mean, I think you just have so much insight and wisdom to share with kids, and I'm sure all the kids that are on your teams, and hopefully their parents are grateful that they get to play on your team. Just to have that guidance from a guy who's been there, who's done that, who understands the game, and like you said, respects the game.
Well, I appreciate it, man, and it's a great thing you're doing in with the show and getting all this information out for everyone, and it's the love for the game is it comes through, and this is definitely I'll start listening to the podcast every week now. I'm excited about it. It's good stuff, and I appreciate it. And anytime you need to kill 45 minutes, please give me a call.
All right, thanks, Mark. I really appreciate it.